Well, good evening and welcome to everybody that's watching here this evening and to our lovely set of panelists here to our webinar, Woodcuts Now and Then. We're going to be having a look at the art of relief printmaking across time. This is part of the Art History in Focus collection by London Art Week for 2024, and the next event after this one is on the 22nd. To the audience, do feel free to add questions to the chat facility in the webinar as we go along. We'll do our very best to answer as many of your questions as we can in about 50 minutes time, something like that. This particular webinar has sprung from the two excellent exhibitions, The Devil is in the Detail, Dürer's Great Passion, and Early Woodcuts from the Schroder collection. Which features alongside an exhibition called There Goes the Sun, which is of woodcuts by contemporary artist Christiane Baumgartner. And both of these fine displays are currently on show now until the 10th of April at Strawberry Hill House in Twickenham. So if you haven't seen them, do go. Strawberry Hill House is a marvel, and these exhibitions are sort of adding to its glory. Very well worth a visit. But this evening's speakers, I'm going to introduce you to all of them now. So we have Caterina Badan. Hello, Caterina.
Hello.
And Caterina is an art historian whose PhD focused on illustrations in early printed books. As the curator of the Schroder collection, she looks after Renaissance silver, Northern Renaissance portraits, 17th century Dutch paintings, Italian maiolica, bronzes, and antique books, and aims to make these precious objects accessible to a wide audience. She has curated Illustrating the World, Woodcuts in the Age of Dürer for the Holborn Museum in Bath, and is author of the catalogue The Devil is in the Detail, Dürer's Great Passion and Early Woodcuts from the Schroder collection, which is the exhibition that you can see at Strawberry Hill House. And our second panellist is Jonathan Watkins. Hello, Jonathan. Jonathan is an independent curator and writer. He was director of the Icon Gallery in Birmingham from 1999 until 2022, during which time he gave Christiane Baumgartner, who is our third panelist, her first major exhibition in a public gallery. Jonathan was previously curator of the Serpentine. He's been a director of Chisenhale Gallery. He's curated a huge number of international exhibitions, including the Biennale of Sydney, the Tate Triennial, the Shanghai Biennale, the Sharjah Biennial, the Guangzhou Triennial, and the Quebec City Biennial, as well as winning the Prudential Award for Visual Arts in the UK in 1992. And in 2013, I think this is very interesting, was nominated as one of the top 100 global thinkers by Foreign Policy magazine. So we're looking forward to some great thoughts tonight, Jonathan. And in 2019, he received the inaugural Ampersand Foundation Award to realise the exhibition of his dreams, Carlo Crivelli, at the Icon in 2022. And Jonathan was responsible for inviting Christiane to be part of the exhibition at Strawberry Hill House. And Christiane, our third panellist, hello, Christiane, was born in 1967 in Leipzig in Germany, which is where she is right now. And she studied at the Hochschule für Grafik und Buchkunst, pardon my bad pronunciation, before completing her master's in printmaking at London's Royal College of Art in 1999. Christiane is best known for monumental woodcuts based on her own films and film stills. In 2005, she had her first institutional exhibition at the Icon in Birmingham, organised by Jonathan. And a year later, she was included in the exhibition Eye on Europe at MoMA in New York. A major retrospective toured Europe in 2015 to 16, followed by solo exhibitions at the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston in 2017 and the Davis Museum in Wellesley, Massachusetts in 2018. Christiane's work is in over 50 international public collections. That's a huge number, wow. And she's represented in London by Christea Roberts Gallery, where I've seen her work more than once. And she lives in Leipzig. And then finally, just myself, briefly, I'm going to be chairing the discussions this evening. I'm Anne Desmet. I'm an artist printmaker. I specialise in wood engravings. I am only the third wood engraver elected to membership of the Royal Academy of Arts for wood engraving. And I actually have a large solo show of wood engravings and printed collages opening at the Guildhall Art Gallery on the 12th of April until the 8th of September. But that's quite enough about me. And now we will have something we will get our conversation going. So, Caterina, if you would like to introduce us to the Schroder collection and tell us just a little bit about its origins and its holdings. Thank you.
Sure. Hi, thank you, Anne, and thank you everyone who has joined the lecture today. So the Schroder collection is a privately owned family collection that was started during the second half of the 19th century by the Schroder family. It's a banking family who originally moved from Hamburg to London towards the end of the 18th century. So after they established their business at the beginning of the 1800s, the second generation, so towards the second half of the 1800s, they started to collect artwork. The first collector was called Baron John Sir Henry, and he was collecting silver, bronzes, engraved gems, and all sorts of typical areas of collecting that were typical of banking families such as the Rothschilds. Baron Schroder passed away without children and left his collection to his nephew, Baron Bruno Schroder, who is depicted in these portraits by Philip de Laszlo, together with his lovely wife, Baroness Emma. They really enlarged the collection. And the reason why I chose to show their picture is because they are the ones who put together the collection of books and prints that are on show at Strawberry Hill during this time. They were devoted Lutherans, as is reflected in the quality of the books that are on display, which contain illustrations from Lutheran Bibles or about Lutheran propaganda. If we want to move to the next slide, this is just a snapshot of the drawing room in their house that was called Del Park. It doesn't exist anymore, near Windsor Park. And this is where they display their whole collection. And the next slide, please. Here it shows a short summary of the areas of collecting. So we have Northern Renaissance silver. We have a very important collection of German Renaissance portraits from which is currently on permanent loan to the Holborn Museum. There is a collection of 17th century Dutch pictures. We have Italian Renaissance bronzes, maiolica, engraved gems, and snuff boxes and enamels, among others. So it's very varied, and it's a very interesting collection. Yes, so this shows a picture from the exhibition at Strawberry Hill, where we're showing the books that we're collecting by Emma and Bruno, with the entire series of The Great Passion, which you can see hanging on the walls around the room. So I am credited as the curator of this exhibition, but I have to admit that the real curator here was Baroness Emma, who is the one who carefully and meticulously chose this group of pictures and books that she purchased from the sale of the library of collector Charles Fairfax Murray in the 1800s. And we have the papers, the catalog that she annotated when she was buying these works. And we can see that she had a clear interest in the German woodcut illustrations. And this is why all of these works came together and can be enjoyed and tell a really great story about the origins of woodcut printmaking. And on the next slide, we can see one of the most important works that are on display, which is the Nuremberg Chronicle, which is one of the most, or one of the first illustrated books that paid great attention to the aesthetics of the book. And it also brings the whole exhibition together, because the Nuremberg Chronicle were produced at the workshop of Michael Wohlgemuth, which is a workshop where young Dürer trained. So you can see in the same room this book with the images of artists that taught to Dürer, and then around the walls you can see how Dürer brought forward the technique and how he really brought it to this next level.
And how did the exhibition come to be at Strawberry Hill House, Caterina?
So it first had a previous life as the exhibition entitled "Illustrated the World," which was held at the Holborn Museum last year. And the director of Strawberry Hill, Derek Purnell, and the curator, Sylvia Dowley, came to see the exhibition, and they just thought it would be perfect for Strawberry Hill, since Horace Walpole was actually an avid collector of Dürer's work. And so we just repurposed it and tried to tell a bit of a deeper story in the new incarnation.
Excellent. Jonathan, if I can bring you in, you were responsible for having Christiane invited to show her contemporary woodcuts alongside Dürer's at Strawberry Hill House. And I'd love to know, how did that come about? How did you come to be involved in the whole exhibition planning, and how did you come to invite Christiane?
Yes, no, well, you know, one of the things that I did at Icon in our program there, which was ostensibly contemporary and modern, was often combine work by contemporary artists with historical figures. And you mentioned the Carlo Crivelli show of 2022. I mean, I also included work by a British artist, London-based artist, Susan Collis. So I had a reputation for sort of mixing up art history with contemporary work. And so when they asked me if I could think of something something contemporary that would run alongside the Dürer show, actually Christiane was the first name that sprang to mind. In fact, during the phone call, I mean, it's like I know somebody who would be perfect for this. And I'd worked with Christiane in 2005. I'd been invited to Leipzig. It was all part of a project of development for something called Saxony in the UK. It was a festival to celebrate culture from that part of the world. And it was an idea of doing two exhibitions. And what was it that I'd show alongside Christiane's work? And it didn't take me long to come to the conclusion that Max Klinger, late 19th century, early 20th century, well, more than not, a printmaker would be perfect. So when I showed Christiane, it was a historical show that I had alongside, and similarly, she's an artist with such strong interest in the tradition, which is very strong in Leipzig, and I mean, although not directly influenced by Dürer, I mean, she sees herself very much in that line, and and so yes, I mean, I suggested it, and sort of quickly we started working on what kind of exhibition we'd make, given the space available and what was in the Dürer show.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's great. It's lovely when these sort of serendipitous connections happen, really. That's brilliant. And that leads us neatly to Christiane herself. So Christiane, if you'd like to introduce us to your work and yeah, tell us something about it.
Yeah, sie contre-jour. And when Jonathan sent me photos of Strawberry Hill, I was immediately thinking of this work, because I don't know why, because the building is so tremendous with the gold and the red wallpapers, and I had thought a bit of the Sleeping Beauty, so I choose Contre-jour rouge. And if you go to the next slide, please, we see the fireplace. And on the left side, I got cosmic fruits. And on the right side, Totes Meer, the Dead Sea. And these are now all light-related images, some mostly sunsets, not all. Cosmic fruits is actually artificial light. The others are all natural light. But this is in a way where I am now, and these are also colored woodcuts. But it was a long way to come here, and it was actually a detour via video. And if you now show the next slide, we see an image of a woodcut, what I have done off in video still. And this is now more than 20 years ago. And just after I had studied at the Royal College, where I was just working on video and not on printmaking, whereas earlier I had learned all the printmaking techniques in Leipzig. But when I came back to Leipzig, I had the feeling I want to do something by hand again. I loved the idea of the video, and by this time in London, I also had used my video camera as a sketchbook. So I did videos which were not with drama. They were more like a still image with slightly differences and slightly movements. And then I was back in Leipzig in my studio at the Spinnerei. And yeah, I really thought it would be good to work with these two techniques. It took me a year to figure out how it would be best and why I want to do it. And the reason is, these are both, also video and woodcut are both image reproduction techniques. And video is, or was by this time, the quickest and the last reproduction techniques, the newest medium. It was just digital video what we could use. And woodcut is the first and most ancient reproduction technique. And this is also something what was very important for Dürer. I mean, Dürer was so, he was so clever to put his initials in his plates, yeah. And this was something how he could spread his body of work. So this is actually the link between video and woodcut, and that's why I'm using woodcut, because it's most simple. You just need a piece of wood, a knife, and to cut, and then you can ink it up with a ruler, and then you can even use a spoon to print. So you don't need any electricity, any technical environment. You can do it in your kitchen, and that's what I loved. And with video or with computer, by this time, it was still that if you had forgot to save it, it was gone. Yeah, the work was immaterial. It was not really there. But woodcut is something solid. So, and then I decided to use the line grid to cut the video still to get a gray tone image out of just black and white, because in woodcut you just have black or white. You have the piece of wood what you leave, this can print, and you have the white, what is the white of the paper. Of course you can ink up your plate in different colors, but this is then a second step. And so if we go now to the next slide, yes, so this is now a detail of Lisbon. I choose, for my first woodcut, I choose this highway image. And I made also a test print of those line grid, because I was not even sure if I will be detailed enough in my cutting that the image will be readable for the viewer. But it is. And also, I decided the line grid in the landscape direction, in the horizontal direction, because I thought this is more like an information line, or like a reading, you know, like language, like text. And also what I think is very important about it is that this line is in a way like a binary system, like the language the computer is based on. So again, we got the idea of analog and digital. So these were all thoughts I had in mind. And also I thought, because I was just back in Germany, I thought it has to be black and white. One reason was, if it's black and white, I keep the widest range in contrast, from the whitest point to the darkest point. And the other reason was actually traditional German woodcut, going back to the roots, Dürer, of course, but also then artists like Künstlergruppe Brücke or Blauer Reiter. So these were all things I had in mind, and I thought I have to go back to traditional German woodcut. And it was funny when I then visited my old teachers from the Royal College later on, and they were like, "What? What are you doing, woodcut?" Because it was so unsexy. But of course, yeah, it's so easy if you say I'm a video artist. Yeah, it's easy. But if you say you are a printmaker, you do woodcut, you work, you have dirty hands, it's different. You have to start describing, what I don't really like. So, but now if you go to the next image, because I then had this one print, it took me ages, it took me months to trace it through. I did trace it through, then I cut every second line away. Then printing was a nightmare because we did it all by hand, and I had to figure out how to get it done in this size. And then I gave it to an exhibition and I saw it and I thought, no, it's wrong. Yeah, it's about time and movement, and how can this work in just one image? So I decided to go back to my footage and choose 4 images, and now you can just flick through, just by chance and how by composition. And please go further. Yeah, this is the 4th, and this is now an. Oops, sorry, one back. Yes, this is now a shot of my studio in Leipzig, just to give you an idea of the scale, because I choose the frequency and I choose the size because of the images, but also because of, like, with the next work. If you go to the next work, to the next slide, yes, Transall, because of the size of the body and of the size of our rooms we live in. So certain images need to have a huge scale to give this impression I want to give. Like Transall, this is now 4.35 meters, so it's really large. And if you go to the next image, what is the detail of Transall, just to show you how it's from the near distance, because what I think is very interesting, when you are close at my work, you don't see anything. So you have to step backwards to see it. And what I'm always surprised myself is how good the human eye and the human brain is able to combine this and to see this and to read this. So please, the next image. So then I was working on speed-related images like the windmills, and you can go to the next one now. And then the next one. I was, should actually be a video, but we got just now a still image. I was then using the camera by placing it out of the side window of a moving car. And I really loved, because when you look at in a certain distance, in a certain speed to the objects in the foreground seem to pass by quicker than the one in the background. And also the bushes in the foreground became like an abstract line. And I really liked this because it gave me the same amount of color, the same amount of information, but just in a different composition. So if you now go to the next image. Yes, thanks. I then made a big woodcut of 3 windmills, and with this blurred bushes in the foreground, yeah, to give the idea of speed into the so static medium of woodcut. I think this was really a strange idea, but I was really interested into how I could get this. And again, it was the same like with Lisbon. If you now go to the next image, I thought it should be the whole sequence. And here now I found 8 video stills where we just could see the windmills. So this is number one. There's nearly no windmill to see. And now number two, please. A little bit. And then number three. Yes, some more. And I got number four here. We stop, please, here. And so altogether, I had 8 video stills. And number 9 was totally blurred. So I thought I'm not cutting number 9. But while I was cutting them, because it took ages, because they are big, 1.85 meters by 1.45 meters, I thought, this is even not a whole second. And it's a third of a second, yeah? 1 second is 25 images. And my question is also what we see, how we deal with what we see, yeah? And I slow this all down. So if you now go to the next image, I did bring a whole second. I then cut a whole second. And this was also shown at the Icon in 2005 of just ordinary bush landscape. And then the next image, please. This then brought me to landscape. This is now Allee. We got Allee 1 and Allee 2, please. And here I was using color the first time. And also I did not cut the whole image. I left areas just as wood, and you can see also the wood grain. And I decided to print this in night blue because I thought it would be too dark in black. And I did bring this detail because what I really like is how little information we got. Yeah, and when you step backwards, you see the shadows and the trees, and it's everything there. I like when it's so minimal. Yeah. So the next image now brings us to Luftbild. I then, when you think about speed, I then came to war imagery and media image, and I took videos of the TV screen, actually of a very old TV screen, and I got this moire, what I thought is very interesting, what you see here on this airplane image, and it looks a bit like a radar, and I in a way it's a mistake in the image, yeah, or it's an interference, but I was really interested in it and cut it in woodcut. So I cut the radar or the interference to show that this is a media image. And if you now go to the next image, I have brought Totentanz with me. What is more organic, it's actually a jet stream of a shot airplane in Second World War. And it was very short sequence, and I placed it as one big image. And for me, it's also, I mean, Totentanz is like Dance of the Dead, but it also has something very alive and very organic. And I think this airplane had a camera on board on a parachute and was gliding down because the sequence was very, very organic. And then my work became even more organic. The next image, please. The wave. It is a reminiscence to Hokusai, but of course, it also has to do with destruction, forces of nature, flood, climate change, and everything. And then the next image will be Phoenix, what is for me kind of the same, out of the same topic. But here I figured out how to work with color and how to work with multicolor in one plate, because I did not want to have it too much technical based. Like when you work in color in woodcut, you would usually use different plates, and then you have to think a lot about registration and everything. And with my lines, I thought this would show too much the hustle and the nightmares you have, because there are lots of nightmares. Also printing one of those is a nightmare. But I love when it looks easy and just perfect and no one asks, you know, that's actually something I really don't like. In printmaking, you are always asked, how have you done it? Yeah. So it should just be about the work. So this is something what is important for me. And when I look through my work, I think in a way I work, I mean, coming to the immaterial, to the light, to the sunsets, but in a way it's about the loss of the image, or the perception of the image. And I'm doing this with the grid, with the line grid, with speed and movement, and these blurred images with the structure, the moire, or the low resolution.
Can I jump in here now and ask you a question, Christiane? Talking of the going back to talking about speed and movement, all of the parallel lines, all of those horizontal lines in your prints, that's clearly a kind of labor of love, a kind of meditative act almost to create those. And I was wondering whether you actually feel it as a kind of meditation as you work, or if it's something different. You're conveying speed, but yes, in a medium that's incredibly slow and exacting and demanding.
Yes, I mean, in a way, I'm slowing down artificially, or I show for myself passing of time, passing of lifetime. And when I don't have a very hard deadline, what I sometimes have, but when I don't have this, it's nice to be in the studio and just do cutting for a few hours. And the good thing about this cutting is also I can stop every minute. I lose the concentration or the spirit for it. Different to the printing process, especially those big ones, we have to carry on. We can't stop. Yeah.
And just we were saying earlier in our previous chat that the scale of your work is very important, and I'm sure that viewers like me looking at this on the screen, it seems at a small scale so redolent of wood engravings, and wood engravings of the 19th century. Even a particular kind of type of wood engraving seems to me to work on many different scales and many different levels. The wave in particular, I think, works both on the miniature scale and, I am absolutely sure, on a very large scale. I haven't really got a question there, that's just a comment. But now actually I'd like to bring Jonathan in, because I think that we have some rather wonderful images of yours, Christiane, of the Nordlicht, and it would be very nice to get Jonathan's views on your use of light and how that relates to Dürer, perhaps.
Yes, well, I can talk about the selection of work for Strawberry Hill, which I mean, it's quite a small venue, so you know, an idea of making a survey of Christiane's work wasn't really on. She mentioned, it's quite interesting actually, listening to her talk about Contre-jour and the Snow White reference, you know, or Sleeping Beauty, the idea of something going on inside this forest. I mean, it's an extraordinary neo-Gothic piece of architecture, and of course there's the idea that the Gothic arch is somehow derived from the intersection of branches of trees. I mean, it's lovely that we've got that work in the show. You know, you know, there's very interesting development in Christiane's work, where there's more emphasis now on natural phenomena. There was a lot of speed in the early work, you know, the idea of the second passing so quickly through 24 frames. And then the appearance of this more elemental work, you know, and you know, the idea of the ultimate source of light, which is the sun. You know, the idea of the photograph as a sun picture. I mean, it's just such a smart, just let me say, a kind of smart culmination, or if you like, you know, start, you know, point at which to stop and sort of focus on what's really kind of basic in the work. And there's a sort of melancholy there as well that we sort of picked up on, and to some extent that informs the title of the show, There Goes the Sun, as opposed to Here Comes the Sun, which you know, was a reference to pop music, which often happens in Christiane's work.
Maybe we go to the next slide while Jonathan talks, because now we got a few sunsets.
Yeah.
I could mention one more thing about the sunsets. Yeah, we could stop here for a moment with Contre-jour, because I mean, now I'm working with sunsets, and I think this is one of the most dangerous themes one could do as a female artist. And I mean, it's a real balancing act between kitsch and proper work, I think. And but I enjoy it just, and I love how the light. I mean, I'm often at the beach at the Baltic, and I'm often watching the west, and it has this dream, and you look in the sun, yeah, you look in the sunset. This is there is so much in it. Yeah.
There was also, I remember, Christiane, we talked about the idea of being in East Germany and looking towards the West. That was something else, that adds a kind of political, both the personal and political dimension to the work.
Actually, I mean, this we talked earlier when we had a conversation a few years ago, no? And yeah, we were always going when we were for holiday at the Baltic, and everyone was meeting for the sunset. But on some certain beaches, you were not allowed to be there after the sun has gone. It was not allowed to be on the beach because you could escape Germany. And I know people who escaped by a paddle boat. I know 2 people who made it in February and survived. But we just were standing there and looking towards the west, dreaming. You know, it is difficult to remember, but we were not allowed to travel. And the only country we could go without any visa or whatever was Czechoslovakia. And then even Poland was difficult. We could go to Hungary, but you had to apply. So, I mean, like that. Then a few years later that I was able to study in London, this was a dream for me. Yeah. So it's really, yeah, I mean, my whole education, my whole work would have been totally different if I would have stayed in East Germany. Maybe we go to the next slide. What is the last one of my woodcuts? This is Melancholia. What is also a shot I done at the Baltic, and this is a photo. I have not changed. The clouds in front of the sun looked exactly like another globe or another planet. So that's why I called it Melancholia, because of the Lars von Trier movie. But maybe Anne wants to ask
well,
now.
it's sort of, yeah, that image of yours links us neatly back into Dürer. So it would be, I'm interested to know whether in your education, whether Dürer was a figure on the school curriculum. I mean, here in Britain, art education is terribly lacking in schools. So I believe that children in this country could grow up into adults with no real awareness of the great artists of the past or the present, whether from Britain or elsewhere. And I'm just wondering, is that the case in Germany, or is Dürer and other great German artists and great European and international world artists, are they taught in your schools or art schools? When did you first become aware of Dürer?
You have to keep in mind, I'm not from Germany, I'm from East Germany. This was different. And I can't remember when I got to know Dürer first. I mean, we are grown up with Bach and with Dürer and with Luther and with Gutenberg. And I mean, Leipzig is a place of printing. Yeah. So my mother was working in she was a librarian. So I can't remember when this was, but I'm sure they must have taught in school as well about it. I'm very sure. And
when I saw this work, I mean, and Christiane suggested that we include it in the show, the title Melancholia immediately made me think that she was making the connection with Dürer's Melancholia, and then discovered
Absolutely.
said that there's actually a reference to a film.
Sorry, I didn't think of Dürer. And yeah, but if we now go to the next slide, what is a very funny surprise, I did actually a print of my plate, what I had to do in the first study year, and I did this print last week because I couldn't find an impression. So when I then studied art at the Hochschule für Grafik und Buchkunst Leipzig in '88, I think I started to study, so it's still in East Germany. We had 1 year woodcut course once a week, I think half day or the whole day, I can't remember. And this was the last task after the whole year, because then we were better in cutting. It started with normal squares, and then we had to do a spiral and whatever I forgot. But this was a copy of a medieval woodcut, and we could choose out of a sheet of paper the image we would like to. And then we had to use tracing paper and watercolor and traced it through. And then we had to place the traced paper onto a piece of, I think it's cherry wood. It was a hard wood. And then made it wet from the back and run it through the press. And so we had a reprint on the plate, and then we cut it out. Very simply done.
It's lovely to see that, and it does link us back nicely to the times of Dürer. So, Caterina, if I could bring you back in, it would be lovely to hear your thoughts on how Dürer works with colour and light, the suggestions of colour within a essentially monochrome oeuvre.
Of course. Could we go to the next? So thank you. So I thought this would be the perfect image to sort of illustrate how Dürer was tackling the problem of color and light in a monochrome medium. So first of all, we need to remember that at the time of Dürer, the technique was very young in Europe. It had been introduced at the beginning of the 1400s, but just a very coarse images, mainly playing cards and saints that were hung in people's houses as talisman, or were collected for private devotion. They were very, very simple, very, very coarse images. They look like those sort of shapes that you cut on a potato and then you do the print, like children's images. It was only during the second half of the 1400s that artists started to experiment with the technique and to try to obtain a more pictorial results. And this was very much tied to the book industry. So the first artists to work in this medium were actually producing book illustrations. And the Nuremberg Chronicle, as I mentioned before, is one of the very first books where the quality of the illustrations is of a very high aesthetic standard. So when we have Dürer working on this image, he is inventing the technique. He is not just experimenting. He's doing something that didn't exist before, and I find this really interesting. So he had to somehow take inspirations from what he knew. And so if we can move to the next image, thank you. So at that time, Dürer was also experimenting with drawing. These are called chiaroscuro drawings. They are drawings that are made on tinted paper, normally like a darker ground. So we have the blue Venetian tinted paper on the right, which was the most sophisticated that an artist could get. And we need to remember that in this period, Dürer was working in Italy. He went to Italy on his second trip there. And so working on this ground of tinted paper, only with the black ink or black brush and white highlights, he would create these really vivid images. And here we have two of the most famous. They're both at the Albertina in Vienna. We have the head of an apostle and praying hands. And so it is, they're both monochrome. And you can see how just through black lines and the use of hatchings and cross hatchings and the white highlights, he managed to create these three-dimensional solid forms. So if we could please go back to the previous, thank you. So what he did in the woodcut technique, he tried to apply the same concept of tinted paper, which represents a mid-tone, by covering completely the surface of this image with parallel lines that interestingly are horizontal, like Christiane's work. And you can see, for example, behind the figure of Christ. So these parallel lines create what we call mid-tone, which is some sort of a grayish color for the paper. And then with the hatching and the cross-hatching, he creates the darker tones, the darker shades, which would correspond to the ink in the drawing example that I made before. And by leaving the paper blank, by leaving the paper white, he would get the white highlights. The way he was modifying the tones, the black tones and the gray tones and the white tones, was through the density of the lines. So denser lines, closer lines create a darker area, whereas when you space the lines further apart, you have a lighter area. So you can see that, as I was saying, the mid-tone behind behind Jesus creates this sort of gray area, and the different shades of black and gray define the quality of the white. And so, for example, in this image, we can see how the halo of Christ looks like it's shining because all the lines around it are very dark. It's defined by a very dark area around it. Whereas the white of, for example, the cloud to the right is defined by lighter shadows because you have wider sort of further apart lines that create these grayish areas. So it's a play of contrast. When you have a dark black lines, the white will come out stronger. And when you have more subdued colors of grays, then the white will look a little bit less bright. And so these, if we move to the next image, the next one, I just wanted to show again this picture because I think in this image, Christiane really brought this idea to the maximum. It just went one step forward. Here, the light is not just shining, it is glowing. She managed even to create the rays of light coming through the trees, and it's always through this game of contrasts. And I don't know, Christiane, if you wanted to add something about
I know we should be a bit quick because of running out of time, but maybe I can add, because of the woodcut, the line in the wood, and I'm using plywood, so I'm limited onto a certain thickness or thinness of my lines. So I only can do it maybe 0.5 millimeter, but not less. And this is actually a limitation I have to deal with. And sometimes then the shape of the sun really doesn't turn out like what I want to have, because I want to have it, like you just said, that it's getting a glooming and that you don't look at the shape itself. But with this one, it worked very well. And some others I had to throw away because it didn't work. So this happens. But what I like is that you now see the white, and my whitest white is the color of the paper. So I don't use white by printing. I'm just using the paper. And so the white in the middle section seems lighter than on the paper edges. And this is something I really love.
Yeah, it's very, very powerful and very effective. If we could move on to discuss the monumentality of some of Dürer's compositions, Caterina, that would be wonderful.
Of course, I suppose we might have to stop at this one because we might have run out of time. But
yeah,
yes,
I'm quite quick now. Yeah,
just wanted to draw another parallel between Christiane's work and Dürer's work, which is the feeling of monumentality, which is under more than one aspect. So in this case, I wanted to show Dürer's triumphal arch, which is a huge woodcuts made up of 36 large sheets, and the whole the total size is 3.5 meter high by 3 meter wide, and it was commissioned by Emperor Maximilian I to Dürer, and so its monumentality in size, obviously, and the image on the right is just a close-up of one of those details to the bottom left, but also the concept of reproducibility. So Maximilian could have commissioned an architect to build a real stone triumphal arch and have it, for example, in Augsburg, which was one of his favorite cities. But no, he decided to commission a paper one made by Dürer, because it could be produced in many hundreds and hundreds of copies, so that instead of having it in one city, he could have it in every single town hall all across the empire. So already at this stage, the emperor had understood the importance of this technique. And so the next image shows another example of monumentality in a different way. So again, composed of different sheets of paper. I think this is a woodcut that you produced, that Christiane produced during her trip to Quebec, and it represents a waterfall. I'll let you say more about this. I just wanted to say that the choice, in my opinion, of hanging it the way you did, different heights with that horizontal line as the common thread, is really a really incredible idea, because it really challenges the composition. It really makes it more articulated, and it just looks like the water is coming, the space is invading the space of the viewer, as if it was spilling out of the frame. So I think it's again, once again, a step forward from what Dürer was doing 500 years ago.
Absolutely.
Yeah, this was actually a piece I did for the Quebec City Biennale, where Jonathan invited me. And the reason why I did this composition was that I first thought waterfall is a fantastic theme for me. But then I thought, no, or I felt a bit like it's all sad with one image of a waterfall. For me, it looked, the photos I had done and the videos I'd taken, it was too much like a postcard, or I was not really interested in anymore. But then later, when I decided to bring it all together, I found out that I'm more interested in the horizontal line of the water level than of the vertical line of the falling water. And then when I had this idea, I really like the silver line, what goes through, and the noise. I mean, I still hear the noise when I see this. So that's why I had chosen this composition. And also it was important to have 5, because, for instance, number 2 is with very little information. And this is actually one of my favorite. When your eye starts to move on the image, and then you grab some sharp bits, and then you start again circling around.
And thanks for that, Christiane. And in a historic context, Caterina, can you tell us something about the sort of economy of details within smaller compositions by Dürer?
Sure. So if we could move to the next one. Yes. So this one, again, really sums up the idea of typical Renaissance composition. This was made by Dürer after the second trip to Italy. So after he embraced really the Renaissance style. And we can see how he organized the composition with the whole action taking place in the lower part of the picture. And he left exactly half of it, the whole top part, to define the space. And it's just the cross bolts and an empty wall with a circular window, which has a function in itself, is not decorative. It's just to emphasize the central axis of the image. So you have the cross of the vault and the circular window, and Christ and little St. John, and the leg of the table creating this perfect symmetry. And then you have all this tumultuous sort of action going on. Christ has just revealed that one of his apostles will deceive him, and so all the apostles are shocked and they cannot believe, and they're saying, no, it won't be me, it won't be me. And there is all this really frantic action at the bottom, and then this emptiness at the top, and it's sort of counterbalancing the narrative as well. And then obviously the perfect perspective, the linear perspective that he had studied in Italy. And so again, this reminded me of one of the works by Christiane, which is the next, sorry. Here I wanted to show the difference between the way Dürer was dealing with the space before and after the second journey to Italy. So in the previous picture, you have this perfect Renaissance perspective, whereas here you have this still very Gothic flavor. There is no perspective. It looks more like a medieval tapestry with this almost horror vacui of entirely full surface. There isn't one bit that is not decorated, and this very calligraphic linear quality where the shapes are defined by the line and not by the cross-hatching and the light, as we've seen with the previous images. And so I just wanted to draw the parallel between the previous image and the next, which is one of Christiane's, as you know, again, perfect axis, perfect balance, and economy of details, and just the perfect eye for a beautiful image.
It is. We're running quite short of time now. It's
yes, I think,
image, but we can't linger, alas.
Yeah,
so
that's yeah. Okay,
we need to move on.
Absolutely, yes. I feel we might have some questions from the audience.
And I think you've got one more image of Dürer's Harrowing of Hell, which actually is my favorite exhibition from the entire exhibition.
I'm sorry. And it's
I
the one that
curated a show for the Ashmolean of 100 years of wood engravings, and included that as the sort of precursor to wood engraving, because there is one of that particular print in the Ashmolean's collection. So I would love to see it in your show at Strawberry Hill House. That was wonderful. I think I'd like to just ask Jonathan a quick question before we move on to questions from the audience, and that is to do with printmaking really as an art form. It's in the British art world, really, there's long been a sense that printmaking is something of a poor relation at the feast of art forms. You know, relatively few contemporary printmakers are household names, and those who are tend to have had a parallel body of work in another art form. You know, David Hockney, Paul Arago spring to mind immediately, on which their reputation was built. But Dürer's renown, you know, 500 years ago was really largely built on the wide dissemination of his prints. I really was wondering whether you feel that that's to do with the market forces, because of prints being generally less expensive than individual artworks and therefore get less interest from the media, or whether it's a problem of printmaking still being rather poorly understood by the public, or whether you feel there are other reasons, or perhaps you don't perceive this. Tell us your thoughts about this.
Well, it doesn't occur to me. I mean, I sort of, you know, if I'm working with an artist who's making prints, I don't consider it to be sort of lower down the ladder, lower down the scale than if I'm working with an artist who's painting with oils on canvas. You know, contemporary art now is just so, I mean, there's so much variety in terms of medium, you know, and it could be video. Actually, interestingly, we did show some video work by Christiane in the Icon show in 2005. You know, we're showing work that's performance, that's sound, conceptual art. Of course, it sort of throws all of this question of hierarchy up into the air. You talk about the market. I mean, I think that's key. You know, prints are not as expensive as unique works of art. I mean, if a print is in an edition, you know, it's more accessible, and that's why some people choose to work with it, because, you know, again, it's got a kind of political dimension. Also, you know, some people prefer to sell it, you know, for the same reason. That doesn't concern me so much. It's, you know, it's a medium like any other. But I suspect, you know, the emphasis on the unique object in the art market is probably the reason why you might perceive a certain prejudice.
If you had a dream exhibition of printmakers, who would you include in that?
Well, I mean, there are quite a few that I've shown, and Franz Goertsch, Swiss artist, is somebody that I've shown, and I've shown more than once, as I have with Christiane. Thomas Buick is another historical figure that I whose work in wood engraving I absolutely adore. An artist that I've started to work with more is Barry Flanagan, and in fact, in a couple of weeks' time in Berlin, I'm going to be showing in an exhibition a suite of lino cuts by him. You know, he's more famous for sculpture than for printmaking, but
yeah,
you know, clearly he loved working in various ways of printmaking, and the lino cuts are they're a revelation. Really.
Well, thanks for that. We are running terribly short of time. We're running slightly over time, in fact. So what I suggest, I'll have a look at the questions from the audience now, but if at the same time we could just sort of gently scroll through the rest of the images so we at least get a chance to see them. Certainly, you know, they end with some wonderful images here of Dürer block and print, and one of Christiane's blocks, so that's really, really beautiful to see. But we've got here the questions. We've got one. Christiane's prints are so large. Can you explain the process of carving the block, please?
No, I mean, I mean this. I thought it was too seen on this one slide. I'm just cutting it by hand. I'm not. I mean, maybe this is something I forgot to say. That it's all handmade and all made by myself. I have no assistant who does the cutting for me, and I'm using a normal scalpel and another knife what we had still from East German school, also art school lessons. You know, it was really a chopped kitchen knife to do this. And I think for me it's very important that I do it by hand, and that there are all my mistakes and bad days in it as well. And it makes it so alive, because if I would just do a computer printout or a silk screen of this line grid, it would be different, or computer cut. Yeah, so it would make no sense for me to do a laser cut, for instance. It would be a totally different topic. Yeah, I would do another work. For me, it's that I do it by hand.
There is actually a slightly more specific question about your technique, and it's from Sumi Pereira. She says, since you mentioned the difficulty of working with plywood and getting fine lines, would you start with the key areas like the halo of the sun's glow before you embark on the rest, as presumed easier to cut lines, especially since you admitted to having to discard failed experiments? So do you have a sort of order of cutting?
I keep those fine areas for the rest, for the last time, because when I'm lying on the plate, something might happen with it. So the more dangerous areas I keep for the
And actually, there's a comment here that I love. Someone put, loved Anne using the word serendipity. It's one of my favorites and appropriately coined at Strawberry Hill House. It was indeed Horace Walpole coined the word serendipity in a letter. So that was accident. Nice serendipity there. It's one of my favorite words too. Let's see, do you have any more questions here? Oh, yes. One more question here from Julian Lafan says, thank you. This has been very informative. Would the panel share where they see the place of the matrix, the block, after the printing?
Also for me, I could say it's in Germany, I would say it's Mittel zum Zweck. I need it for the printing, because my work is about printing and about reproduction technique. I don't see the matrix as a sculpture, but and I never have shown them, only like for education, yeah, to show a small one. But I have not thrown them away. I still keep them with me, and I need them around me because I don't do so many during the year, yeah. Some of the big ones I just do 1 or 2 per year. So I never say never. Maybe I need them one day for building something, or maybe I need them to do it. I don't know. I mean, I really don't know. But so far, for me, it's really not a piece of art.
I'm inclined to agree with you on that. Although that said, the exhibition I have coming up at the Guildhall, I will have some of my blocks on display, but just as a sort of interest, because people, I think, are interested in the matrix. Although obviously the final artwork is the finished result. So yes, I'm on the same wavelength as you there. We don't seem to have any other questions, unless any of the panel have any other questions that they want to put. Well, actually, I've just got one, Christiane, which is that your work, because it relates so much to film and video and film stills, how do you feel that connects with a much younger audience who are not of the age to know about wobbly screens with interference patterns? Does it, I mean, I would think it would resonate, but I'm a similar age to you, and I have a history in, you know, being aware of wobbly videos and bad connections on TVs.
I know I sometimes don't even talk about that I had problems with video because nowadays you can't imagine this anymore. I don't know. I don't know how a younger audience would react to it. I think, I mean, for instance, one question what never turns up in these talks is why I changed the format. I mean, all my earlier work is landscape format because of the digital video image. And now, since I'm using my smartphone to use the source imagery, I often have a portrait format. But that's, no one realizes it, you know. So I don't know. I don't care if, yeah, I feel I don't have to care about the use or about the audience. Yes, I mean, I think it needs to work for myself, and then it's okay. And if I'm the only person who think it's right, then it's okay as well.
Good answer. Yes. Okay. Well, I think we can draw it to a conclusion there. I'd just thank everybody for listening and thank the panelists very much for a fantastic session. And just to remind the audience that this is one of a series of webinars, and the next one is in 2 days' time. And you can book those through London Art Week through their Instagram and their website. Okay. Thanks very much. Goodbye.